help you
Thank
tilt that.
you. Thank you so much. Okay, so moving on to our second teacher of the day, Sarah Poet. So Sarah, there you are. Hello, welcome. And Sarah is going to be speaking to us about this theme of loving the masculine from the sacred feminine heart. So I'll just introduce Sarah. Sarah is a trauma-informed space holder for women, men, and couples as we emerge from the patriarchal trauma of separation. And if there was a theme to Sarah's life, it would be walking the path of feminine and masculine reconciliation and reunification as a modern woman, and then sharing back her findings. She is the founder of Embodied Breath, which is her practice really for teaching about masculine and feminine and transforming lives through these practices that help to restore us to our original templates and innermost truths. Sarah is also a mother, and she's also a storyteller of examples of feminine and masculine integration. And she's also the host of the Sacred Remembering podcast. She is dedicated to creating spaces and tools for modern women on their reclamation path, and she's recently opened up a Sacred Remembering membership community, which she invites all of us into as well. Finally, she is now launching the gender equity services, offering to organizations that might be ready to have these innovative conversations about the feminine and the masculine leadership as they occur within organizations' values and bridging old paradigms to new. And she's currently writing 2 books. So Sarah, doing tons of amazing things, really looking forward to hearing from you. So I hand over to you now.
Thank you, Amrita. Thank you, Advaya, and everyone here. It's really wonderful to look out and see there's women knitting and women with their children and eating, and so I love that we're meeting one another here just as we are, just where we are. I am truly a highly relational being, and so I've been watching the course so far because I really wanted to make this as applicable as I could to where the group soul seemed to be at. And so I'm trying to get back to gallery view so I can see all of you all now. And so I want to talk today about feminine and masculine and trauma and coming back to the heart. And I feel like I have a really big call to women as I'm saying these things. And I want to acknowledge that, it's not easy. I don't discredit anything that we have been through collectively, individually. I'm always happy to tell my story, though I don't know how much I'll be doing of that today due to time. But I am a woman who has endured and navigated quite a bit of trauma associated to the masculine, which I just say for solidarity, right? And so everything I'm saying isn't lofty. I've walked it. I know what it takes, okay? And so, but I really believe that we need to explore these things because I think, and I've experienced, that we cannot be in this essence of the wild feminine, the true feminine heart, if we don't also acknowledge our relationship with the masculine and come back to what I would call wholeness or unity. Those are the words that I use instead of balance. I don't identify as much with that word because I think what we're doing is reclaiming union. We're reclaiming relationships between masculine and feminine on all levels. And what I call masculine, for conceptual sake, I want to talk about it in 3 ways, or you could know that I'm referring to it in 3 ways. The masculine within us, because as Dr. Elizabeth said, we all have feminine and masculine in us. And then the masculine relationally in other humans, right, regardless of gender. And then our relationship to the sacred, to the unseen, to whatever you call God, right? And so there are masculine explorations on all of those levels and expressions. But so I am such a talker, and I'm definitely not going to get to all of what I want to say. So I want to invite you all to check out the Sacred Remembering podcast. Definitely sarahpoet.com. If you want tools around feminine and masculine reclamation, it's there for you. And so reach out to me. If anyone wants to ask a question and we don't get time today, you can schedule 15 minutes with me for free on my website, because it's just so important to me that we as women have safe spaces to ask these questions about coming back together. Okay, so I want to do something that's a little interactive, just using the chat box here for a moment. Sacred Remembering is the name of the podcast. So in the chat box, I want to invite you to pop 3 words, okay? Not sentences, just words. 3 words, first associations. What happens, what do you hear when I say the words masculine or masculine leadership? What do you associate with that? Masculine leadership. What comes to mind? Boom, boom, boom. Just pop them in the chat. Patriarchy, logical, structured, power over, strong, alpha male, force, ego, dominance, power, frustration, threat, abuse, bully, protector, power, linear, oppression, data, men, patriarchy, rational, strength, aggression, selfishness, analytical. Okay. Thank you so much. Someone says white men, exploitative, driving. Yeah, suffocating. Wow. Yeah, strong guidance. Okay, extractivism. Okay, all right. Thank you. So our associations with masculine and masculine leadership, I've tried to capture quite a few as you all were typing that. Okay, so let's take a breath. Now the next 3. I would like you to just tune into 3 words that you would like to see from man or masculine. What do you want? What do you long for in your feminine heart? Care, supportive, listening, acceptance, collaboration, balance, caring, helpful, healing, strength, tenderness, safety, observation, distance, relational, sensibility, a fire, equality, listening, non-judgment, honesty, collaboration, supportiveness, understanding, creativity, acceptance, listening, love, communication, space, regenerative, I love that word, connectedness, protecting. Okay. All right. So right here in this group, and this is exactly what I thought would happen, there is a big difference between how we see, I'm saying we collectively now, and I'm making generalizations, right? How we see men, masculine leadership, masculinity, and what we want. Okay. So I want to talk today about projections, like what you see is what you get a little bit sometimes, right? And I want to just plant the seed for all of you to do some journaling or something like that later. This disparate nature of what you want and what you see when you look at the masculine. And then, sometimes as women, we create these circumstances in our lives because we're walking around like, well, he's going to hurt me. He's going to hurt me. He's going to hurt me. Right. And then we see more examples of like, oh, there's domination. There's domination. Well, are we looking for, oh, there's love. There's benevolence. Right. Okay. So the last one that I'd like to do this one more time, 3 more words. When you attune to the concept of sacred masculine or divine masculine, what is that for you? Just 3 words, please. Protection, holding, compassion, gentle, actualized human, care, balance, action, presence, empowering, courage, magic, conscious sexuality, respect, empathy, service, inspiration, bright, holistic, focused, action, compassion, whole, sensuality, support. Beautiful. So this is more in alignment with what you'd like to see, it sounds like. So you've probably done some exploration of what sacred masculinity is, these concepts that that feel nice to you, and then you want to see more of that. So let's talk about that. So I want to invite the idea that patriarchy is a trauma of separation. Patriarchy is a trauma of separation that we have all encountered. So patriarchy does not equal man. Man does not equal patriarchy. They're not the same thing, okay? So our associations with the patriarchy, it would serve us very, very well to create new associations with man and masculinity. Because patriarchy, although sure, we can find examples of it being perpetuated through men, patriarchy isn't masculinity. And we need to recover this and resurrect this as women in our hearts. Okay, we need to remember this. Because when we associate man with patriarchy, we're really limiting the definitions and the potentiality of masculinity. We're limiting ourselves. So we all suffer from this trauma of separation. And the week 2 information was so good about the suppression of the feminine, and all of that stands, right? That this has all been done to us, done to the feminine. This patriarchal trauma of separation has created a consumption pattern with the feminine, where it was assumed that the feminine energetic could just be taken, whether that's your time, your energy, your body, your resources, the earth's resources. And so that's what I call the consumer program, or the dominator program. And that can actually run in any gendered person. Absolutely. Thank you, Amrita, for helping me keep time. And so what we're recovering, in week 1, Anne Baring was talking about how religion separated out the feminine. And that's so important, because what we're reclaiming now as women, and this is why the podcast and my work is called Sacred Remembering, is we are reclaiming our direct connection to source energy, which is not just feminine, it's not just masculine, it's both. Feminine and masculine comprise the energy of the entire universe. Everything can be looked at in terms of feminine and masculine. And so, when the feminine was cut off, repressed, and traumatized in this religious, talking about really big things and very few words, and in this big act to make the feminine non-existent, or make the feminine just available, right, for usage, we were all cut off from what the actual feminine is, but also from what the actual masculine was. Because source creation, I call mother, father, God. Okay, and it wasn't always like that, because I was raised in a Methodist church. I was sexually abused in the Methodist church. My father used that religion to absolutely control me. And so I was done with a masculine God. I didn't want anything to do with it for most of my life. And then I was reclaiming the feminine, and I was on this path of reclaiming the feminine. I used to be a school principal and a school creator. And I woke up to like, oh my gosh, there's this thing called the feminine. And I want to remember it. I want to embody it. And I walked toward that. And what ended up happening, very long story short, was that I kept getting myself involved in situations and relationships that would absolutely backfire on me. And it would be like one more, piece of evidence of suppression, and one more piece of evidence of a man being willing to, hurt me, that kind of thing. And so I needed to look at like what was going on with me and what was my relationship to the masculine. And remember that the true masculine is not a tyrant. The true masculine has an essence that I want to know, And so I had to start asking, well, what is that? Okay. But I'm getting a little ahead of myself. I want to talk about projection. So because we've had various traumas collectively and individually that have to do with a notion of the masculine, the patriarchal idea of the masculine and men, because we've had these traumas, our bodies remember that trauma lives in the body. And that, so our physiological response to even men or intimacy or partnership or even friendship, our physiological response to men can be a traumatic one. I see some heads shaking, right? And so you might want a good relationship with man or masculine, but there's so much mistrust because these traumas live in our cells. And we're carrying the epigenetic, the ancestral trauma of the women that came before us. My paternal grandmother was raped before 6th grade, and it continued her whole life. Her resources were not her own. She never considered the idea that her resources could be her own. And so when I have walked this walk, I have had to also address the trauma of the ancestors. And we're carrying that and transmuting that as well, because we have all, for thousands of years now, grown inside of this trauma of separation, where the masculine itself was separated from the feminine itself, from its truest, like God essence, source essence, creation essence. We lost that, and in its place, a tyrannical representation of the masculine took over. So we have a trauma response in relationship to just the notion of masculine. And yet, what do we want? As women, we want to know the sacred masculine. And it's very, very normal for us to look to the brother beside us, to that partner, and say, aren't you going to show me the sacred masculine? Where's my sacred masculine partner? Right? And so, I mean, you can pop a yes in the chat if you've done that, okay? Or if you're looking for that. Yeah, I see some thumbs up. So I was doing this. I mean, I was on this road of feminine, masculine reclamation. And I'll just tell a short story that involves some trauma and everything else. I had decided to leave my job as a school principal, go out on my own. My father hears about it, reacts such that I actually feared for my life. Now, that trauma was inside of my body because he didn't threaten to kill me just then and there, but it was in my body and it was in my ancestral line, right? So I have this fear arise in my body like, oh, I'm stepping out on my own as a woman. I'm going to own my voice. I'm going to do this thing. And the quickest thing that happens is the biggest threat that I think I'm going to die. Okay, I was sick. I couldn't get up. It was everything. At the same time, I had a breakup. There was a very misogynistic event at work when I left my career. So here I am in the first 6 months of owning my own business that's about feminine empowerment. And what do I want most after that amount of trauma and how I related to my father in this lifetime? What I wanted the most was an expression of the sacred masculine and safety. You know, the subconscious, the traumatized parts of my system wanted safety. And so what I did was got myself involved in a relationship that ultimately 6 months later scared the shit out of me again. Like, it wasn't safe either. And so we keep getting ourselves in these patterns as women because our relationship with the masculine idea, essence, archetype itself has trauma associated with it. And then we're looking at men and saying, can you please show me that I'm safe? Can you please show me that you are not the example of the patriarchy? Can you please show me that you've done your work to clear this up? And how's that working out for us? It's not working out very well for us. So after that, what I realized is that this is a walk of inner union, first and foremost. And when I talk about sovereign energetics with women, this is what I'm talking about. We all have both feminine and masculine inside of us. And so, in Jungian psychology, which some others have spoken to, we'll talk about the anima and the animus. And so we have a relationship with the masculine internally, with men, and with the divine. And so I'm curious to see a show of hands. Does anyone here have a sacred masculine practice, like spiritual practice or embodiment practice? Is anyone actively reclaiming the sacred masculine? Okay, cool. So how does this start to come up? Well, the reason that I bring up projection is because if you ask yourself, what do I want from men? That is the first place that you can just quickly turn it around and say, what do I want from my inner masculine? So for example, in female entrepreneurship, I see all the time women have a hard time with structure, right? They have a hard time like making the money, or where's the money going to come from, or how am I going to hold the money when it gets here? Those are all masculine energetics. And so that's really good work to do on the inside. Like, where is my masculine in relation to money, structure? Rather than looking outside of myself for those things in a man, how am I doing with those archetypal practices? Okay. I am in the Rose lineage, if that resonates with anyone. So Mary Magdalene was my family, and on my path of sacred remembering, I recovered that. And I spent many, many, many years putting Mary Magdalene and Mother Mary and Lady Isis back, in their rightful place beside the masculine. And I had an altar in my home that was Yeshua, Master Jesus, and Mary Magdalene. And I had their pictures, and I had a whole union altar set up in my home with crystals. And I spent years getting to know these feminine archetypes and remembering and reclaiming and living their story and bringing their story back to life through my life. And one night, in the middle of the night, I was awoken, which sometimes happens when I'm not getting the point during the day. And it was like, knock, 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 it's Jesus. And I was like, okay. And he's like, okay, you've had my picture on your altar for years now. How well do you actually know me? And I was like, and he said, good job. Like, I wanted her there too. You got her back. You wanted her beside me. She's in her rightful place. Absolutely. Was it union? Absolutely it was. Yes, of course. How well do you know me? How well do you trust me? How well do you really know the masculine heart? And the truth was, I didn't. I had just fought so hard to get the feminine back in her rightful place that I wasn't really attuning to what the gift of the masculine actually was. So I want to just speak for a few more moments about coming into unity. And then I want to take your questions because I really see them coming in. So as women right now on the planet, what I'm talking about is not a light thing. It is not a light thing. And I didn't really get to speak to where men are at this time. So I'll say, women are the leaders of this movement now, because we have been given the opportunity to have conversations like this, to outwardly remember our femininity, to reclaim the trauma from our body, to reclaim the cellular health of our DNA, on and on and on. Like, we're taking that back. You being here right now is an example of that. I know that you're in trauma healing. I know that you're, exploring all different kinds of modalities and resurrecting this feminine. Men have not been doing that at the same rate as we have been, right? So we're a couple of decades, I would say, ahead of men's reclamation, generally speaking. And so now there's this amazing bloom on the planet that I'm witnessing of women realizing, oh my gosh, in relation to the feminine, I have to also resurrect the masculine because I'm hurting for that. My heart is hurting for that. And instead of just projecting that onto men and being disappointed, we need to remember the sacred masculine and bring that back through our heart's expression. I'm the mother of a son. When I look at my son, I want to feel a positive association with masculinity, right? I want to pass that forward. I don't want to project my frustrations from the old onto my son. That's irresponsible. That's perpetuating something called the mother wound in men. And so, every time there's that projection outward, that anger, bring it back and ask your heart, what really wants to happen here? So what we are being called to do as women and as women leaders right now on the planet is significant. It's huge. We're being called to heal our trauma. We're being called to come back into sovereign energetics, which means your resources are your own and you don't have to fight for them anymore. And you don't have to be in a trauma orientation anymore because it just is. You don't have to defend it. It just is. You get to have your energy. These are sovereign energetics. And we're being called to remember the love of the masculine in our hearts. I did a TEDx on this topic. When I was called to do that TEDx, I was so hurt. I was so hurt by a man. And I knew that it was my soul's responsibility to get on that stage and talk about love. And that 6 months was like a fiery hell of an initiation because I knew that love was the mission. And it is not easy. It is not easy to forgive what has happened. But I think forgiveness comes when we come back into these sovereign energetics and we know who we are. Anything that we feel toward the masculine will naturally heal. You don't have to force yourself toward forgiveness before you're ready. So I have called it, falling in love with the masculine or falling in love with the king essence or whatever you want to call it. But that's what it feels like. It's like, are we willing as women to open our hearts? Because the heart is what the feminine is. Are we willing to open our hearts and to love even though we've been hurt? And to love what we know is possible in the hearts of men, even before we see it. Even before we see it. And when we do that, and when we come back into this inner union, we hold an energetic, a frequency that is naturally activating to any man that we are around. Any man that we are around. I was recently called to hold ceremonial space for a Cherokee man on Cherokee land, and my lineage is also part Cherokee. And I was called by the ancestors to hold space for a Cherokee man. And I mention that because if I had not done this work, I would not be in a space where I was holding ceremonial space to activate a Cherokee man back into a higher level of integrity because he was running the consumer program. I didn't have to school him. I didn't have to lecture him. I didn't have to use words. I invited him into ceremony in the feminine heart. I put him in water on Cherokee land, and I doused him in roses. And these are the kinds of things that I do, like, you know, that are my closeted priestess femininity, right? But I never had to have the conversation with him about integrity and the consumption program. I talked about my experience, and he saw a woman that understood union. He saw a woman that I don't have the projection on him that I need him to be something else for me. Right? And so that's the level of embodiment that I think a lot of us are called to do right now, because what we're doing is we're saying no to the trauma of separation. We're saying no to the patriarchy, and we're choosing unity. This is the time of unity consciousness. This is the time of Christ consciousness returned. We know this. What is unity consciousness? These words we like to throw around. What does it mean? It means embodied feminine and masculine in the space of the heart. It means oneness within. And so women, I think it's ours to do. And this is the way I see women as being the leaders of what will happen next. It is the feminine heart that will lead what is happening next. Okay, it's big work. It's bigger work than any of us want to do. I know that. I know that. I know the level of trauma. I know that we want a savior sometimes instead of having to do what I'm talking about. But it's one step after the other, looking at where our projections lie and looking and just asking the soul what wants to happen next. And the soul will lead you to what wants to happen next. Absolutely, and every time. And so piece by piece by piece, you call those parts of yourself home, and you call the traumatized parts home, and you hold her, and you hold that child. And you get to know the sacred masculine, if in no other way than concept right now, right? Your imagination, your heart. We're dreaming him back. And I'll remind us of the quote that Lila June shared as I close. She said, "If the women can heal, so too can the world." If the women can heal, so too can the world. So you are not traumatized beings. You are not broken. You are not less than. You are not a wounded thing. You are wild, and your integration is here and waiting, and it's time. So much love to you all. Thank you. I couldn't keep up with the chat, but Amrita will ask some questions. Thank you.
Sarah, wow, just thank you so much. I'm so blown away by your talk and just by your call and your message of reclaiming. I mean, for me, in my language, it would be, you know, reclaiming from the shadow, you know, the divine masculine within ourselves. And just as you say, that power of doing that integration work of unity within ourselves, and then just purely by our being in that integrated space, we're making it available, you know, to the men around us without even having to enter into that dynamic, you know, enter into those dynamics that so often can be more around power or around wounding or around projection, all these things that aren't really, can't take us any further, you know, can only keep us stuck in those dynamics, you know, that have created the issues in the first place. So thank you. Yeah, super inspiring. We have so many questions, so I'm going to do my best. And yeah, bring them to you now. So Claire Russell, she says that she's really interested in your point about old and new paradigms. especially around the use of the feminine and the masculine as terms, whilst also not being exclusive or being binary. And she says that she resonates with both the use of those words and the limits of those words as well. And just wondering if you had anything to say about that language.
I addressed this in my TEDx, and it's simply words are tools. And, you know, I love feminine and I love masculine, and they make union. And so words are tools so that we can talk about this walk. And really, I'm a map maker, you know, like I have this pathway for women that's 10 phases of feminine and masculine reclamation and reunification on a modern women's walk. And I lay it out like a map. It's available in the membership or at sarahpoet.com. And of course, that is going to be able to be proved wrong, right? Like if I lay that out, like who am I to say that there are 10 phases for a modern women's awakening? Like who am I to say that? Is it still a decent tool for a woman who doesn't even know to reclaim her masculine yet? Absolutely, like 100%. And so I would encourage us to not be so serious. This isn't anything about what Claire was saying, but you know, like, can we use tools and explore these things without being like absolutist about it, and just explore the concepts?
Thank you. I'm going to combine a couple of questions here around ancestral trauma. So this is from both Masayo and Julie, who say, firstly, what do you do when you feel such ancestral trauma responses? And like, what do you do to kind of unravel that? And then the second part that I'm adding on from another question is, how can you heal the ancestral trauma of patriarchy?
Beautiful. So everything's happening in the present moment, right? And so you don't have to go looking for what to heal. If it's yours to be with, then it's what's going on for you in the present moment. And so the trauma that I was healing, you know, 12, 15 years ago is nothing like the ancestral work that I might choose to do today. You know, it's like peeling layers, right? And so you don't have to look for what to heal. Please hear me on that your soul will always show you exactly what it is, and you don't have to make it arduous, right? It can be a gentle unfolding. The other thing I will say is that you get to choose what work you do, and you are not responsible for healing the entire lineage. So we have ancestors that are deceased that are not well. And this is some of my shamanic training coming in here. And so you could have ancestors knocking at your door saying, heal this for me, heal this for me. And you get to say no. You get to say, I'm not doing the work that you refused to do in your lifetime. And so, you know, I would work with someone who's, you know, qualified to talk with your ancestors if you're getting into that work. But really, it's like all healing is happening in the present moment. And when you heal, you are healing backwards and forwards, right? And so we're healing for our lineage backwards and forwards. Every woman on this call, you being here is meaning that your children don't have to do as much of this work, right? And so it's so bold and so courageous, and that's how we do it. And I'll be complete with that. Yeah. You can ask me another one, Amrita.
Thank you.
Did that answer the question?
Yeah, you did. So Julie, she says there's a part of her that gets scared when you say that we need to strengthen our relationship to our masculine side, because she says that patriarchy puts such a strong demand on women that if we want to succeed, we need to basically become men and renounce our femininity, etc., etc. So yeah, can you speak to that?
Oh, I can speak to that for days. Yeah, okay, so again, we have healthy masculine and unhealthy masculine. And if I'm a woman that is just, you know, climbing the career ladder, succeeding by someone else's standards, burning myself out, I've been that woman for sure. I'm probably taking on some unhealthy masculine characteristics or archetypal characteristics, maybe some patriarchal or tyrant. Like I have been the tyrant. Many of you have been the tyrant in your relationships, right? And so in a power system, this is a side note, but if somebody can be the power over and someone has to be power under, or victimizer, what we've done very naturally as women is to say, well, if they had power over me, then I want the power back. And then we perpetuate the polarity in this unhealthy matrix that doesn't even need to exist. And so that was a side note. So when if I were in my feminine all day as an entrepreneur, I would be meditating, I would be taking baths, I would be going for a walk, waiting for some inspiration. I'm not much gets done when just the feminine is in charge. But the masculine provides structure. The masculine's like, okay, what are the main priorities today? Where are the places I have to go? Okay, how can I carve out time for the feminine today? Right? So the masculine holds the structure so the feminine can flow. I literally have this whole time and energy program called Structure and Flow, y'all. Yes. And so I use it every day as a female entrepreneur because we create my masculine. I rely on it to get work done, but I don't need to feel frenetic. That masculine is going to respect my feminine. That masculine is going to protect the resources, protect the children, love the women, right? Like that's all inner masculine. That's making sure that the feminine, that the children, that the money is taken care of. Whereas those were things that historically women projected onto men, right? Like, where's that man that's going to provide and protect for me? And so I'm not saying that you can't have a man that provides and protects you, like, yay, love, right? And we, like us learning to do these things and integrate these things in ourselves makes us more sovereign, energetic beings. Yeah.
Thank you, Sarah. We've got another question here from Charmaine about kind of ancestry as well. So she's wondering if it's how important it is for her to kind of consciously trace back her maternal lineages and to understand the ancestral trauma present in that, and if she's not able to do that, will there be a struggle to really understand and work on her limitations that she's dealing with in her present time?
No, and so I'm feeling into this question, and so if there's like adoption, or there's the loss of a mother in some way, or we don't know the stories, we don't have the stories, there's more mystery, but your story is also uniquely your own. And so in the sacred remembering journey, it is meeting what is arising in us. It is meeting what is arising, the next thing that is arising in us, that soul nudge, right? Like learning to listen to those nudges. This nudge might say, go to a river, go stand in this water. I'll give an example. At my birthday, I felt this, you know what a Shiva Lingam rock is? They're often associated with the masculine. Okay, so I felt a Shiva Lingam rock coming to me. There's this intuition like, oh, I'm going to have one of those. I get this Shiva Lingam rock that I'm not kidding you, it was like this big. I was like, whoa, we have some work to do. Okay, so this rock comes to me. I don't know why the rock, I don't know everything about it, right? So the mind doesn't know, but we're women. We live in the mystery a lot of the time. And so the voice, right, the intuition or the soul or whatever the voice was, said, take this rock to Cherokee. I live an hour and a half from Cherokee. Take this rock to Cherokee, put it in the water, and make atonements for the feminine in your line. Oh, okay. Well, of course I'm going to listen, because that's a pretty clear intuition and download, right? So I go out on a Saturday and I put the rock in the water and I apologize for the feminine in my family line. Okay. And then I go home. I don't have to know what that did. I don't have to know exactly who I'm talking to. I don't have to know everything, but I'm willing to honor the mystery. And then 8 months later, I find myself in Cherokee with a Cherokee man in front of me in the water. And I'm holding space for him to do masculine, feminine healing work, right? So that's like where the mystery astounds me. And it's like, the more I listen to that, the more unfolds. And so I don't look for what my grandmother deceased wants me to do. You know, like I don't look for that. It just, you'll feel a ping, you'll hear a little inspiration. Go to this park, sit by this tree. You might go, you don't notice anything happening. And it's like, okay, well, I did it. Okay. You have no idea. You have no idea the impact of such seemingly insignificant things. So we don't have to search for it. We do not have to sit down and like try to channel, you know, the predictions for the rest of our lives. And I totally get looped up in that as well. But as we recover the feminine, we are living with the mystery. And so, you know, we have a habit of treating our healing walk like that very important job, you know, as if because of the trauma of separation, we think we can fail at it. We think we're not going to get there, or that we're not there yet, like whatever that is. But what if this moment right now was exactly perfect, and the tears that you need to cry in this moment, or, you know, the movie you need to watch, or, you know, like, what if that is exactly the walk and it's exactly perfect? And it is.
Beautiful. Thank you. Alana asks a great question. She says, what happens if we can't see our projections onto men because there's just so much grief, and that the grief and the rage kind of can prevent us or won't let us process or move towards integration within ourselves, and therefore the masculine or the men around us?
Yeah. Thank you. Well, just asking the question is like evidence of it happening, I would say. We often don't see our projections until something happens. So, you know, if you're a woman that dates men, but you don't have to be. I'm a woman that dates men. And I've been married to one man. I've had all soulmate relationships. So that's another thing I really love to talk about. You know, there's not just like a one. There are these soulmates from soul family that come in to reveal things to us. You know, it's not always the happily ever after. It's also the reveal. And so oftentimes, like in the rear view mirror is where you see your projections. Oh, I wanted safety from that man, and it wasn't a safe situation, but I laid down my discernment so that he could prove to me safety. Okay. So that's not something that you heal in a day, right? So then you go to your trauma modalities, you go to your self-love, to your self-care. You know, I love things like EMDR, somatic therapies, dance. One I'm really, really loving right now that's accessible for everyone is The Class by Taryn Toomey. It's online, it's exercise, but it's extremely trauma informed, and whatever you're working out emotionally will work out in the course of a class. And so you don't have to be able to label the projection, the behavior, the thought. You know, as we do this work, sometimes it's an emotion, it's a frequency. But we need helpers, we need community, we need groups of women. You know, we need helpers. Like we need the external mirrors. And so session work with whoever is resonating with you at the time. Like maybe I'm talking and you're like, I want to book a session. There's a resonance, right? Maybe somebody else is talking and you want to book a session. Like it's trusting that exactly the right thing will come on your path next. Like it will. If you're saying, I would like to figure out why I have this pain right now. The next thing will come to help you get your answer. Yes.
Thank you. I think we've got time for some more questions, so we'll keep going.
Is Pat here yet? I love Pat McCabe.
Yeah, Pat's awesome. I think she is joining us at 8:30, hopefully. So we'll keep going.
Okay, great. Yeah.
So a couple of questions from Sarah and Julianne, who speak to this idea of practices. Can you recommend practices that strengthen the inner masculine? And also someone's asking, Julianne's asking that she's interested in your work on the feminine and masculine leadership. And can you talk a little bit about how that comes into practice as well?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so feminine and masculine within, if you're looking at what to do, you know, generally we're either like super duper structured, right? Like the to-do list worshiper, or we're like, you know, very flowy, right? Women tend to vacillate like that, I find in my practice. And so, you know, you have to go through the personal exploration, because we don't have time here today, of what is sacred feminine, sacred masculine? Like, what is sacred feminine in work? Well, for me, that is allowing time for creativity and to go deep. Because if I don't get that depth of creativity and like that deep feminine, then I don't know why I'm doing what I'm doing. And so in the TEDx, I have this like wheel, right? The feminine always goes deep to come out and tell the masculine what she's heard. I was actually in a ceremony with Pat McCabe one time, and you know, the women that are bleeding sit outside of the circle. They don't come into the circle or into the sweat lodge, and they're there for the purpose of sharing what they intuit, because at that time is when the veils are the thinnest. And so the feminine goes deep so that the feminine can hear the wisdom. And then the feminine comes back, and this is within, and this is also relational, ideally, right? So then the feminine comes back and says, this is what I intuit. This is what I hear. And if the masculine honors the feminine, which I might take a moment to talk about now that we have a few minutes left, if the masculine can honor the feminine, then he takes that information and integrates it into his decision making. So one doesn't rule the other, right? Not everything the feminine says goes, not everything the masculine says goes. They share leadership, and they have to hear each other. And one doesn't default to the other one either. This is a myth in a lot of polarity teachings. Like the feminine is supposed to submit to the masculine. You've heard this stuff, like just submit, and the masculine's supposed to like make the decisions. I mean, in it's not sacred sexuality, but like the dom sub kind of culture, you know, it's like now I've really opened a door. Let me reel it back in. So the masculine is not dominating. The sacred masculine is not dominating. And so it doesn't overpower decision-making, but both have discernment that must be used. And so the masculine could say, thank you, I hear you. And today I must get the work done. So the feminine might be saying, I need to go deep. I need to go deep. I haven't heard myself, right? And he's like, wonderful. But today we have 5 appointments, so we can do that on Thursday, right? So the masculine's always protecting the space for the feminine. I want to say this that was not the question, but because we have a moment, this was the part that I skipped, but here we are. Men must come into unification with the feminine. So if we're on this path, a woman, I know I'm being very like polarity here, but a woman's going to typically resurrect the feminine, remember the feminine, and then realize, oh, I also have to fall in love with the masculine. I also have to reclaim that. Because I'm not whole, I'm not in union unless I've done both, okay? The man has to reclaim the masculine which our culture has just really begun to do. Like in the 80s and 90s, we had the mythopoetic men's movement. We have like Mankind Project in the States. I don't know if you have that in Europe. And so there are men's groups for sure and available, but I have not found, I'm not saying they don't exist, but I was very, very close to a lot of these groups for many years. I have not found men's groups that understand that the men need to make amends with the feminine in their heart and with the sacred feminine. They understand that they need to do work to heal their relationship with the mother and the mother wound, but they don't understand that the men have to also come back into sacred union with essentially the Holy Mother. And so until a man understands this, the man's projection onto the woman will be of his lack or his severance of his relationship with the sacred feminine. And I was in a relationship just in the past 2 years where, you know, the man had a relationship with the sacred. The man was very, very attuned to like taking care of women and children, and he was an earth worker. He worked in sustainability. So all signs would say this man protects the feminine. However, he had not come into the healed relationship in himself. He didn't have a sacred relationship with the feminine. And so when it came down to it, he was not a protector of the feminine. He was willing to cut off, hurt, and dominate, just, you know, just like other examples that we know. And so are many, very, very few men at all are understanding that this is important. Okay, so we have to have grace and we have to walk this path alongside our brothers. But this is what will be projected onto a woman, a man's mother wound. And so you felt this before, the willingness to like both, I want her, I want everything from her, I would consume her in a moment, she's so yummy. But if something touches that mother wound, he'll destroy her in the next moment. You've experienced this? That's the unhealed mother wound in the man. And so this is a both and situation where, I mean, every human on earth, masculine, feminine, I think if we were having this conversation in trans communities, which I've had, you know, it's like, awesome, thank you. You know, if we have this conversation with the children, awesome, thank you. There's another language rather than man, woman, and gender that we can use to talk about things like leadership, which was the last question. So that's how I'm approaching gender equity work in organizations and leadership, is to talk about values. And if you're looking at leading, you know, research about what is needed in leadership, what you'll see is that they're feminine qualities that are emerging as like, oh, we needed this all along. They're not calling them feminine because that language is, you know, often associated with gender. And we don't realize it's what we're doing. But in the workplace and in organizational leadership, what's happening is, oh, this whole domination thing isn't actually serving our organization. We're losing people. It's non-relational. We should incorporate some relationality and some, you know, listening and some collaboration. These are feminine qualities. And so that's what I'm doing with leadership teams, is to look at the values, and then if places are ready for it, we'll talk about feminine and masculine leadership and work expressions, rather than how men do work and how women do work. And then what to do with these trans people in the workplace. Please stop. You know, it's like we value human qualities. What are the qualities for the workplace? So I think we can come to neutrality and common goal setting with that approach, which is pretty innovative for a workplace to be willing to talk about feminine and masculine, but some are ready. Thank you all for listening to that.
That's great, Sarah, and I'm glad you had the chance to bring in that story as well about the work that also the men, need to do around healing their feminine or coming into unity with their feminine. I think we're going to draw it to a close there.